Hey, it's 25 years since the debut of Friends in September 1994. So there's been quite a lot of commentary about that. There was a supplement in the Times today about it and about the show's success. So I thought, being a big Friends fan, I'd do my own little retrospective and share some of my thoughts as to why I feel the show was so successful, and also to address some of the criticism of the show as I see it, as a fan, to sort of respond to that. Firstly, it goes without saying this is all my opinion. You don't have to agree, just my opinion. So I was 9 when Friends came out. I certainly wasn't watching it from the very start. I began getting into Friends probably around 1998, around that time, when it would have been about series 4. So I was 9 when it came out. I was 19 when it ended in September 2004. So it's not a push to say that Friends was an era defining show. A full decade it lasted. Um, and it very much is associated with late 90s, early 2000s culture. What I want to do in this video is I'll break it down, I guess, into segments. I'm going to talk about, directly address some of that criticism, and then get into why I think the show was successful and the influence of the show. So, the criticism, a lot of this comes from so called woke analysis. That is to say, millennials, or certain millennials rather, who are watching the show now. I mean, I'm a millennial myself. I'm an older millennial, but I fall into that bracket of millennials, i.e., anyone born between the mid 80s and the late 90s. A lot of people watching it now are critical at what they perceive to be, although they wouldn't put it this way, the political incorrectness of the show. So I'm going to look at a few areas of that and discuss it a little bit. One of them is the supposed lack of diversity. Now, it is true that there was a lack of visible minorities in the show. Towards the end, Ross dated a girl who was black and a Chinese American as well, but they were more the exceptions than the rule. And as much as I love the show, I would concede that it's a little bit unrealistic for six young New Yorkers to have social interaction over 10 years and for there to be a relatively limited number of visible minority actors. So I would concede that's a little bit unrealistic. Um, Having said that, I don't agree that it's simply a show for middle class white people, and that the characters can just be dismissed as wasps, white Anglo Saxon Protestants. So let's break that down a little bit. Monica and Ross are Jewish. Phoebe came from a hard scrabble background, so you can hardly say they're all middle class. I mean, for goodness sake, Phoebe was homeless. She was living with drug addicts, with pimps. It's hardly a privileged background. Joey's a struggling actor, and he's Italian American. So was the show as diverse as it could have been? Probably not. But if you're going to criticize Friends for that, I would say how many white extras were there in the Fresh Prince of Bel Air? You know, so how many Asian American extras for that matter? So could Friends have been more diverse? Perhaps, but I don't think it should be the main critique of the show. It's a little bit unrealistic, and retrospectively, probably the producers should have considered that a bit more. Um, Another one of the critiques of Friends is that it was politically incorrect. And one of the points of critique is it was supposedly homophobic. Now, the basis for this is that there is one gay character, Ross's ex wife, who is a lesbian. And according to the critics, oh, the show's homophobic because she is always a focus of ridicule. But the ridicule is not directed at her, it's directed at Ross and his insecurities that have come about from that situation. Likewise, one of the criticisms is, oh, well, it's transphobic because Chandler's father is a transgender woman, and I mean, his biological father has made a transition. But again, the joke is not on his transgender father, played by Kathleen Turner, um, but rather Chandler's insecurity. And actually, in the episodes where you see his father, what you see is a loving and caring parent. And as Monica points out, the point is he was always there for you. So actually, the joke is on Chandler. So anyone that really reads that as transphobic, they're missing the point. Um, it's true that Friends wasn't overly politically correct, and there were lines in the show that wouldn't be permitted today, but I only think that is symbolic of the controlling nature of the identity politics mob. People who will constantly look for reasons to be offended. Um, and the irony about this is Friends was pretty tame. I mean, it had some politically incorrect jokes, but it was always at the expense of the main characters, or at least where there were supporting characters who were deemed to be a bit strange or whatever. It was always in a context that was intended to be light-hearted. I don't think Friends ever crossed the line at being, for example, cruel or sick or anything like that. And I think that's very important because a lot of so-called stand-up comedians today, that is their whole pitch. And it's kind of ironic that this woke generation gets offended by Friends, but they don't seem to be bothered by Family Guy, which is far, far worse when it comes to tasteless humor. Um, so that's interesting. But if you actually look at the comedy, if you actually look at the target of the humor, it's very rarely directed at outsiders. It's directed at the six main cast members, and the irony of their situations, the the insecurity of a character like Shander, for example, who's straight, but he's deemed to be, when he's effeminate in certain scenes, that's not homophobic. It's mocking Shander's insecurity as a straight man. Likewise, some have said, "Oh well, I saw the Independent have this 10-point list, and it was pretty pathetic in my opinion." But they said, "Oh well, the episode where Joey's got a woman's bag, that's mocking, people being the way they want to be." But it's not saying there's anything wrong with men wanting to be effeminate. It's You need to understand the context there. Joey is a man's man. He's a womanizer. So in the context of his character, that's where the humor lies. And I think a lot of criticism of Friends, people miss the wider context. They don't understand where that humor is coming from. They're just looking at it in of itself. I mean, if you just stick on a clip from Friends that is politically incorrect by today's standards, you would probably jump to conclusions, and that's really unfortunate because I really don't think. I mean, if anything, the show had a lot of good values. It showed loyalty. It showed um, the importance of not judging people. There were a lot of episodes that had actually quite good messages if you really spend time and consider it. Now, more practical criticism of Friends, and this is often made in comparison to Seinfeld, was that it was not that sophisticated. But frankly, I don't care. I don't care that Friends had popular appeal, and maybe Seinfeld is more witty. I frankly think, and I'm not going to overly judge Seinfeld because I never watched it, but I think some shows try to be too clever for their own good. Friends never tried to be overly clever. It wasn't slapstick, it was a bit more edgy than that, but it never tried to be too clever. And I think that had appeal. I think people related to that. Um, I've seen a few clips of Seinfeld, and I think you really need to concentrate on the humor to get it. I think it is quite sophisticated, and that's fine. That's great. But that brings me to the next point: influence. Friends was about a group of young New Yorkers. There may have been a few unrealistic plots, right? So you may have had, I mean, for example, the fact that all the characters almost constantly were dating throughout the show. You had the constant Ross Rachel thing, but all the other characters almost always had relationships. That was a little bit unrealistic because, I mean, as someone who's had experience of being single for long periods of time, it's unrealistic, I think, that the characters would always be dating people, even in New York City. But then again, the merits that the show had, in my view, greatly outweigh any negative points. Um, and there were some very memorable episodes. I mean, the thing about Seinfeld, with the greatest respect to Seinfeld fans, I just don't think it had the same influence as Friends outside the United States. And I think this is a useful barometer. I mean, in India and the UK, there were actually Friends themed cafes. Friends is more popular today than it ever was when it was aired. Now, if that's not influence, I don't know what is. And I posted a caption of Friends today on my Chinese social media. Chinese teenagers know about Friends. I mean, I don't think you can say that with many other American shows. Maybe Baywatch, maybe Dallas, but really, the influence that Friends had is profound. And I do think it exceeds Seinfeld. Seinfeld might be wittier, Seinfeld may even be more realistic, but in terms of influence, yeah, I'm sorry. I think I mean, very few people in the UK have even heard of Seinfeld. The only reason I know about it is because I saw one of these comparisons. And I'm not rubbishing the show. I don't know it well enough to do that. I'm sure it had many strong points, but I get a little bit annoyed at Seinfeld fans like rubbishing Friends because I think they're missing the point that they're kind of looking down on it because it was less sophisticated. But I think Friends was more influential. I mean, take for example even the characters. Rachel Green, right? In the late 90s, early 2000s, the whole Rachel Green look, that was a whole, not that I'm an expert on women's fashion, but it was a whole look for women in the late 90s. Um, the one-liners from the show are famous. The character of Joey Tribbiani, how you doing? Bad impression there, but you get my point. I mean, the number of parodies that come out of Friends, the influence that show had was profound. The amount of merchandise, look at the amount of posters. I've even got a Central Perk mug. Um, it's profound. It really is. Um, and for me, Friends had just the right balance with humor. It wasn't too tame. It could be edgy, it could be risque, but it also wasn't sick, and it was never overly cruel. Um, so I think it got a good balance. And each character was memorable. I mean, take any one of those characters, even supporting characters. And by the way, stay tuned. I'll be making another video about the supporting characters and who would be the seventh friend if there was one. But you get episodes and you get scenes that are memorable to this day. And okay, I'm not going to say that no other show has that, but Friends fans just know that inside out. And I think even people who weren't huge fans of the show will be familiar with it. So yeah, for all those reasons, I think that's why Friends was so successful. Um, and I think it's a pity that people are judging it in this politically correct era. Friends wasn't that PC, but to suggest that it was bigoted or that some of the criticism that's directed is totally missing the context, and I find that really unfortunate. Um, so yeah, long may the popularity of Friends continue. I don't think the popularity will go. The actors will get older, they're moving on in different directions. They have moved on, but the popularity of that show is enduring, and long may it be so. I mean, the message of Friends to the loyalty, the sort of values that the show encompassed, I think, are very important. So, anyway, let me know your thoughts. But I'm a big Friends fan, and I make no apology for that. I don't care that it's popular. I don't care that it maybe wasn't the most witty or sophisticated humor. Some of it was quite down to earth. But maybe that's why it's popular. Maybe people like the simplicity of it. And I don't think it's fair to just dismiss it as a show for middle class white people. There were different character developments, there were different character backgrounds. I mean, the background of Phoebe and Rachel, for example, couldn't have been more different. So people need to look at the whole context before judging the show, and I think it deserves all accolades it gets.